The Met Office has warned that this winter could be wetter than normal, with households urged to be prepared for the risk of flooding. Climate change means that the UK can expect heavier and more intense rainfall. And that change will continue over the next few decades, whether or not we're on a path to net zero. So is the UK prepared for a wetter future? Well, the Environment Agency says 1.5 million households are in flood risk areas but haven't got any preparations. Julia, that's not a good figure to be starting with. How do you improve and increase resilience and preparedness?
Gosh. Well, of course, the Environment Agency has a very good flood and coastal erosion risk management strategy, fully funds them to deliver it. But of course, they can't protect us from everything, and we need to do some things for ourselves. So we need to make sure that everybody is signed up for flood warnings if they live in an area that is at risk of flooding. And we need to make sure that people understand the kind of precautions they should be taking. So, for example, if there's a significant risk, then they should have a bag packed. They should make sure they have their medicines ready. They should make sure they can either move precious things upstairs. If necessary, they should be prepared to leave the house, taking their pets with them, those sorts of things. But in general, we need to be designing both our homes and our cities to take into account that there will be much more water around. So we need to take on board what the Chinese are doing, which is they're designing sponge cities, cities that are designed to absorb water. Because as we heard earlier, we're going to be getting more periods of very intense rainfall, which can lead to surface water flooding in our cities. And that's probably one of the types of flooding we are least well prepared for in the UK at the moment.
George, whose responsibility is it to ensure that we're prepared? Is it government or is it individual responsibility?
Well, there's not much that we can do by ourselves. We do need government to intervene, and we need it to be far more effective than it has been so far. I'm slightly puzzled by the particular focus that a lot of people have on how we absorb water in cities, as Julia has just been discussing, because, of course, cities are just a very small part of a river's catchment, and they're at the bottom of the catchment. We also need to be intensely focused on what's happening in the rest of that catchment. How well is the land absorbing and holding back the rain? How well are the rivers slowing down the flow? And if, as we've so often done, we've canalised and dredged the rivers, we tend to speed up the flow towards the cities until it hits the nearest urban pinch point and then bursts its bank. What we need to do is have rivers which hold back the water for as long as possible so that they allow the flow to be attenuated, to be slowed down, to come down instead of in one great big pulse in a long, slow flow. And that means allowing them once more to meander, to braid, to form islands and other obstructions which just slow that water down. Similarly, on the hillsides, let's get some trees back. Let's get some terracing in important places. Let's do everything we can to slow down the flow throughout the entire catchment, rather than sitting there like rabbits in the headlights, waiting for this great wall of water to come down and hit us, and then wondering what to do about it.
Yeah, sitting ducks, I guess. Julia, are we getting the focus wrong then when we prioritise cities and our planning around cities? George arguing that we need to take our focus further upstream.
No, we need all of those things. I was particularly talking about surface water flooding, which is the response to periods of relatively short periods of very intense rainfall. So it's not water in cities, it's not water coming from the rivers, it's actually the water coming from the sky. And surface water flooding is something we are less well prepared for in the UK than we are for coastal flooding and river flooding. But George is right, of course, we should be using nature-based solutions to try and slow down the rate at which water comes into our rivers when we have wet weather. So those sorts of things are very important as well.
George, are there other areas, I know particularly you've talked about Canada, British Columbia, where we should be looking to?
It's really shocking what's happening there. I mean, it's a classic case of a compound climate disaster. So as you know, there was this massive heat dome over that region of Western Canada and the Western US in the summer. And there were huge fires. Those not only destroyed a lot of trees, they also helped to bake the soil. All that ensures that water runs off it more. And now we see these massive dump of rainfall, probably also exacerbated by climate breakdown. And a lot of the communities in British Columbia are now flooded. And in some cases, that floodwater has frozen and is likely to remain frozen for the whole winter. So what they're going to do, I mean, it's almost unimaginable, the situation that some communities are in. It's really, really horrible. And I'm surprised there's so little coverage of it in the news at the moment.